The Atlanta Braves needed another big addition to the bullpen, and they get it done with the signing of Robert Suarez.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. Also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. I am your host, Jake Mastroianni. Been covering the Atlanta Braves for a long time, both written and verbally here on the podcast. You can check me out on social media at Shortstop Ball. Today's episode, we are going to take a look at the Robert Suarez signing. The stove stays hot for the Atlanta Braves. We talked about it after the Mike Yastrzemski signing, that there needs to be more. The bullpen still needs to be addressed. And just a day later, Alex Anthopoulos gets it done with the signing of Robert Suarez. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Well, yes, you were just with me less than 24 hours ago talking about the Mike Yastrzemski signing, and now here we are talking about another big signing for the Atlanta Braves. One I know a lot of us have been waiting for, and that is Robert Suarez. The Atlanta Braves signed the reliever for 3 years, $45 million. The news that the Braves had to designate Ryan Rollison for assignment in order to make some room on there. But the Braves do get it done for the free agent reliever. Looking at the press release here from the Atlanta Braves, said they signed right-handed pitcher Robert Suarez to a 3-year contract worth $45 million. He'll make $13 million in 2026. So you saw that with the Yastrzemski signing and now the Suarez signing, where money a little bit less in 2026. Don't know if you want to read too much into that, but then he will make $16 million in each of the following 2 seasons. He's also so graciously agreed to donate 1% of his salary to the Atlanta Braves Foundation. I think part of the maybe looking more into the reasoning for splitting out the money is that if Iggy were to not come back next year, you now have your closer in waiting in Robert Suarez for $16 million, which is what you're paying Iggy now. So I think that makes sense. And yes, Suarez, it's already been announced he will be the setup guy for Iglesias. I still think you'll see Suarez get a handful of saves, and if things happen to go wrong with Iglesias, then you have a perfect replacement for him right there in Robert Suarez. But at least to begin the year, he will be the setup man for Raisel Iglesias. Now, just looking into the numbers for Robert Suarez, and just to give you a little bit of the backstory, this is a late bloomer. It's a guy that didn't really start pitching until he was 24 years old, started in Japan, didn't come over professionally in the big leagues until he was 31 years old. But ever since then, he's been a really constant contributor in the bullpen for the San Diego Padres, becoming their closer the last several years. In fact, in the past 3 years, he has the most saves in all of Major League Baseball. He led the National League with 40 saves this past season. So he's proven that he can handle that 9th inning. So like I said, if Iggy doesn't return, or if something happens with Iggy this year, you now have a guy who can step in Robert Suarez. So that is certainly great to see. Looking at some more of the numbers for Suarez over the past couple of years. Last season with the Padres, he had a 2.97 ERA, 1.9 WAR, F4 for a reliever. That's a really big number there. 2.77 ERA the year before that. It was 4.23 in 2023, but we all know that season baseball is a little bit juiced up there. And then in his first season professionally in 2022, had a 2.27 ERA. So, 3 of the past 4 seasons since he's been in the big leagues, he's had an ERA under 3. The strikeout rate has gone up and down for Suarez as a big leaguer. And you would think with the stuff that Robert Suarez has, that it might be a little bit more than that. But the strikeout rate was, 22%. In 23 and 24, but last year it did spike up to nearly 28%. That 30% range is what you look for something that's, truly kind of elite-ish, especially among relievers. But the walk rate has gone down each year that he's been in the big leagues, from 11%, 9.3, 6.2, and then last year was down to 5.9. So if he could keep that strikeout to walk rate that we saw last year, 28% K rate, a 6% walk rate, that is really unbelievable mark. So hopefully he can keep that up. Now, it was a 240 expected batting average last year, which was the highest of his career. So maybe a little bit of luck put into those numbers. But again, he's been very, very consistent, very, very good since coming over to the big leagues after, like I said, making a short stint there in Japan. Just looking at the repertoire for Robert Suarez, he throws 2 really hard fastballs. He throws a 4-seamer that averages 98.6 and a sinker that averages 98.4. So for those of you and myself who have been asking to get some guys who bring some more heat for the postseason, this is one of those guys that certainly has that. Now, it's not a guy with that type of velocity, you would think has a strikeout rate over 30%, and that's not necessarily the case, but he does have big time stuff, which does generally play up in the postseason. You look at the expected batting average for those 2 pitches. The 4-seamer, it was 214 last year, but the sinker, it was 288, and just an actual batting average of 139. Now, those are expected numbers. Take them with a grain of salt, but that is a big gap between the actual batting average and the expected batting average on that sinker. Now, that is his 3rd most used pitch, so that's not the one he relies on as heavily. But still really good pitches for him. The whiff rate on that, it's a 24% whiff rate on the 4-seamer. That is really good. Just 10.7 on the sinker. That's a pitch, you're looking really to get more contact with that, more ground balls. It's a 32.8% whiff rate on his changeup last year that he throws 24% of the time. It averages 91 miles per hour. Now, that's a pitch that did get hit a bit last year that he was a bit unlucky with. 310 batting average against his changeup last season, a 281 expected batting average, which is still not great. But again, he's living off that high fastball, high velocity fastball, and a decent changeup, and to get hitters on top of the baseball and get that ground ball, get those ground balls with that. That's what Robert Suarez is bringing. His 4-seamer had a positive run value of 15 last year, and it had a positive run value of 10 the year before that, while his changeup this past season had a -6 run value. So like I said, it wasn't particularly great for him last year. It wasn't particularly great the year before that with a -4 run value. So a lot of his success is coming off that 4-seam fastball that he throws over 60% of the time, threw it nearly 70% of the time in 2024. That is the pitch that he is really working with and that he is really getting a lot of his success on. And when you can throw it, average 98 and you can throw it 100 miles per hour, then understandably why that's a pitch you would want to go to. So that's the rub on Robert Suarez. I think if you want to look at this negatively, which hopefully we're not doing that. I know there's a lot of negative comments on the Mike Yastrzemski signing. I think this is a great signing, but if you want to look at the other side, and I always try to give both sides of it, he's 34 years old, going into his age 35 season. I jokingly sent out in the tweet from _Braves after the signing that the Braves are going to dominate the 35 and older league with some of these signings with Yastrzemski and Iglesias and Suarez. They've been signing a lot of older players this offseason, but again, has been very good, not showing any signs really of slowing down at all. But he is going into his age 35 season, and he is very reliant on that 4-seam fastball and the velocity of that 4-seam fastball. If that were to tick down at all, then that could be a little bit worrisome for him going forward. But other than that, I mean, there's not really too much to be all that worried about with Robert Suarez. Obviously, with pitchers, you're always worried about injury at some point. MLB trade rumors had predicted that he would get 3 years, $48 million. So this is a little bit less than that, but pretty much right on with what MLB trade rumors had predicted there. And he's coming off consecutive seasons with at least 65 innings. So again, he's been very reliable as well as dependable. He did have a little bit of a rough stretch with the Padres last season, but outside of that was fantastic. And again, it just gives you a little bit of insurance with Iglesias that if he's not getting the job done, you now have a guy that you can go to with Robert Suarez that has that ability to also close out games. And this was a reliever that a lot of teams were going after this offseason, that a lot of teams were interested in. So for the Braves to be able to lock him down and get him, even though they already had a closer in place, I think is a really big deal for the Braves to be able to make this happen. Now, again, there probably was, Suarez signing this deal knowing that he could take over the closer's role as early as next year. But he knew coming in, he wasn't going to be in the closer's role. And look at this age with where he's been in his career. I don't think you worry about that too much. It's just maybe getting your final big contract. And that's exactly what he got. And what the Braves got was a really good reliever to fill out their bullpen. Next, we'll take a look at what the bullpen looks like at the moment. Do they need to add more there? Do they need to add elsewhere? Or is this the final big move of the offseason? We'll get into that here next. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Game Time app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Or maybe you're like me and you're just saving up the money and the PTO to go to some Braves games this upcoming season to see the newly acquired Mike Yastrzemski and Robert Suarez. You can check out the Game Time app like I did last year when I got to go to a game late in the season last year for the Atlanta Braves. Prices were really good at that point. I got a deal in section 41 last minute on the Game Time app. And you can too. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Just swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. Thank you again for making Locked On your first listen of the day. Appreciate all your support here at Locked On Braves. You want to be part of our everydayer club? You can go to lockedonbraves.supercast.com to see the prices and details there for those subscriptions. Getting back into the Robert Suarez deal here, let's take a look at the Braves bullpen depth. And is this the last move that the Braves need to make for the bullpen? Certainly the last big move. I would not expect them to make any more huge additions, but I do think this is fine, depending on what they do with Reynaldo, Lopez, and Grant Holmes. But you look at the bullpen right now, the depth chart over on Fangraphs, you have Raisel Iglesias, you have Robert Suarez, you have Dylan Lee, you have Aaron Bummer. They have Grant Holmes in the bullpen. I think I would prefer to put Lopez out there, but either way, I think that could work. Joe Piamps, Jose Suarez, Joey Wentz. The bottom of that bullpen is still a little bit rough for me. And they don't include Joe Jimenez in this either. In a great world where Joe Jimenez is healthy, if you could pull out a bullpen of Iglesias, Suarez, Lee, Jimenez, and Lopez in it, I mean, that's a really good 4 or 5 deep in your bullpen with an Aaron Bummer in there too. And then finishing it off with a Piamps and either a Suarez or a Wentz as a long guy. I think that's a great bullpen. Right now, I think it's just a really good bullpen. I think they're still one piece away. And like I said, that one piece might be a healthy Joe Jimenez. I think they're still one piece away from me really considering them a great bullpen. But Iglesias, Suarez, Lee, and either Holmes or Lopez, and then Bummer as your 4 or 5 top relievers in the bullpen, I think feels pretty good. Piamps is kind of we'll see. Obviously, they got Karinchak on the minor league deal. We'll see what happens with that. Suarez and Wentz are just kind of your long reliever guys. I wouldn't be upset, obviously, if they wanted to spend a little bit more money and get, even if it was just to bring back Tyler Kinley or Pierce Johnson. If you can get one of those guys back on a $4-5 million deal, still, even with these signings, I don't understand not picking those guys up. But even if you wanted to bring one of those guys back at that type of level, I would be okay with it. But I also wouldn't be surprised if this is the last big move we see for the bullpen, especially if they're planning on moving either Lopez or Holmes to the bullpen. I think that gives them a really good beginning of the season with the bullpen, having Iggy and Suarez with Lee, and then either Jimenez, hopefully if healthy, or Lopez and Holmes. I think that's a really good bullpen, not quite to that great territory for me. So again, I think this is probably it. Definitely it for the big moves that the Braves are going to make for the bullpen. But I would not be upset at all if they wanted to make one more smaller splash for $4 or $5 million to improve that depth in the bullpen. Now, the other thing, is this the final big move? And do they have any money left to spend? Checking out Fangraphs roster resource right now where they have the payroll to see what they have it at. They currently have the team payroll at $241 million right now. And they have the tax payroll at $236 million. This is with the inclusion of Robert Suarez that they have listed on here. The AAV of the Robert Suarez deal is $15 million, even though he's making $13 this year, then $16 million each of the next 2 years. So that team payroll is already, this is estimated. These are all just estimated numbers, but the estimated team payroll is already at the mark where we've seen the Braves be their highest. Now, the luxury tax payroll is far from where we've seen it be in the past. The luxury tax payroll, they have at $236 million. The first threshold is $244. So, and I don't think they're going to stay on. I don't think they care if they stay under the luxury tax threshold this year. If they were, they're already at their max team payroll, and they're already less than $10 million away from that first luxury tax threshold. So any other, somewhat significant move would blow them past both of those. Their past high of team payroll, which was around $240 million, I think, in the 2024 season, and past that first threshold. So we're talking a lot about a potential Corey Seager move. You went and made that. It is going to absolutely just blow you past those numbers, which I'm perfectly fine with, and I think this Braves team is capable of doing. But if you wanted to look at it, pessimistically, or maybe even just realistically, with what we have seen from the Braves in the past, you could say they're done. I mean, you could make the case that this team is done and that is their offseason right now. They went out and got their, quote unquote, big bat. They got their bat addition in Yastrzemski, and they shored up the bullpen, getting Iglesias and Suarez, and they filled in at shortstop with Dubón. Whether you agree with that or not, you could very well say that is the offseason for the Atlanta Braves. I see some people talking about Ha-Seong Kim. Look, for me, you want to complete this offseason. I think Ha-Seong Kim is the final touch. You want to really complete this offseason. I think Ha-Seong Kim and a Tyler Kinley, Pierce Johnson type signing really finishes off. You want to really, really go big and get that A++ signing, then you also go find a veteran starting pitcher to give you more depth in the rotation. I've been very much on the side of things here over the past week or so that starting pitching isn't a necessity for me this offseason. Would love it. I think it would be fine. I think it would be great if they wanted to do it, but it's not a necessity. For me, the necessity has been getting another high leverage arm, which they did with Robert Suarez, and improving the lineup, which they did with Mike Yastrzemski. We can argue about that all day if you want. Many of you have in the comments section below, which I appreciate all those who did it so respectfully. But I think you could make the case that the Braves are done, that this is their offseason, that they got two relievers. They found some answer at shortstop, and they helped upgrade offensively with the bat. I don't think this is going to be it. I hope this isn't going to be it. Like I said, I still want them to go out and pursue shortstop, even if it's not the pipe dream and Corey Seager. I don't know that the Braves have the assets, whether prospect-wise or monetarily, to get that done. He is owed a lot of money, but it would be a lot of fun. But even if it's just to go get a Ha-Seong Kim, I saw somebody in the comment section saying 3 years, $32 million. I don't even know that you need to go that far with it, but 2 years, $24 million. Could that get it done for Ha-Seong Kim? And even if you did that, like I said earlier, with where the payroll is, at least according to what Fangraphs has listed here, that would take you past the first luxury tax threshold, which again, they reset the tax last year so that they could do that. I'm assuming be able to do that this year as they have in the past. So I don't think that's going to hold them up. But as I've been saying all off season, what could potentially hold them up is the team payroll, because that's what we know Alex goes off of. And the team payroll is already at its previous high of $240 million. So how much more are they willing to go beyond that? That's the big question that we just don't know. And that's what the rest of this offseason is going to hinge on, is how much more money does Alex have to spend? Because we're in new territory at this point, because he's already spent as much as we've seen him spend in the past. When it comes to team payroll, again, you got to make that separation. Team payroll and luxury tax payroll. The team payroll is now higher than the luxury tax payroll. So I don't worry too much or as much about the luxury tax as I do the team payroll, which is right now, according to Fangraphs, at $241 million. How much more does AA have to spend? If he has $20 million more to spend, I think you can do Ha-Seong Kim and still do another reliever or potentially another starter. If If this is it, and maybe you only have 10 million more to spend and he wants to save that for in-season moves, I could see them being done. So it's one of those we're just going to have to wait and find out. I'm very hopeful. I want to be optimistic. And look, if this is the offseason of the Braves, let me know what you think. Is this good enough? We'll discuss that here in the final segment of the podcast. NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. A receiver gets hot, a defense tightens up, or the momentum flips after a turnover. FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. And you can check it out right now. They have World Series odds. I'm assuming my Braves are going to go up. Nope, they're still plus 1,900. Maybe they haven't adjusted to the Robert Suarez and Mike Yastrzemski moves just yet, but you'll see those change throughout the offseason as more moves do. They also have lines out there for NHL, college football, college basketball, NBA, NFL. So many sports going on right now, except for the best sport in the world. But if you're into those other things, you can check it out at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, just visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Again, thank you so much for joining us here today, reacting to the breaking news of Robert Suarez signing with the Atlanta Braves for 3 years, $45 million. Kind of last off last segment with a question that I want to ask you. And if you're here with me live, you want to answer this in the comments section, I'll try to get to some of those. But if this were the offseason for the Braves, would you be okay with it? Because I know last night, after we talked about the Mike Yastrzemski signing, that I said there has to be more. There needs to be more to this. That while I like the Mike Yastrzemski move and I like that signing, there has to be more to it. And this is definitely more. I mean, this is certainly a big move, but is this enough for you? Is this enough for you that you'd be okay with this type of offseason for the Atlanta Braves? Signing Iglesias, trading for Dubón, signing Yastrzemski, signing Robert Suarez. Is that enough for you at this point of the offseason? I think for me, I look at these moves so far. I think the bullpen's been addressed. Like I said, I would like to just kept Tyler Kinley. I think if you just kept Tyler Kinley and that $5.5 million, I'd feel a lot more comfortable. Not that I think what Tyler Kinley did with the Braves is, believable. But even just a guy for $5.5 million to put at the bottom of your bullpen, be your 6th, 7th best reliever, I think I'd feel a lot more better than having Jose Suarez down there right now. Especially, and maybe had they known more, and I don't know if they did at that time, had they known more about Joe Jimenez, that maybe they would have kept one of those guys. But maybe that was part of being able to sign these guys, is that they had to let them go. Again, these are internal things that we as fans and even those in the media just don't know what exactly the constraints are for Alex Anthopoulos. Again, maybe he had to let Pierce Johnson and Tyler Kinley go in order to be able to sign Iglesias and Robert Suarez. And look, those are better arms, but I would have rather had all of them, because as we pointed out in the first segment, you look at the back end of this bullpen and it's not all that great, especially when you don't know what you're going to get out of Joe Jimenez. You're talking about Aaron Bummer, which I know there's debates on, is he good or not? But the Braves certainly haven't trusted him like he's good. You're talking about Joel Payamps. We don't know what you're going to get. Jose Suarez, Joey Wentz, and maybe you're going to put Holmes or Lopez out there. But that's a lot of question marks still at the back of this bullpen that had you just picked up an option on a Tyler Kinley or Pierce Johnson, you'd feel much better about it at this point. And so, like I said, for me, I think this bullpen is good. I think it's potentially very good, depending on what happens with Lopez or Holmes. But I still would like to see one more guy that I just feel a little bit more confident in the back end of the bullpen. for $5 million or less. You do that, and I'm feeling much better about this bullpen. I think as far as the lineup goes, look, I came into this offseason shooting high, wanting a Cody Bellinger type of bat, a big free agent type of bat, or even a big trade like a Byron Buxton or right now on Corey Seager. I still very much want that. And I think this team kind of needs that big jolt. I think the fan base needs that kind of big jolt after what we've seen the last couple of years. But I'm not that optimistic at this point that those things are going to happen. So I still think for me, the offseason is not complete until you really address shortstop. I don't think Dubón is the answer at shortstop. I think Dubón is great. And this is when I talked with the guys from Locked On Astros. They said the same thing. Dubón belongs on the bench because they've had so much injuries. He's had to play so much over the past couple of years. And so even they agreed with guys who love Mauricio Dubón that he belongs on the bench. That's where he needs to be. And so I still think shortstop needs to be addressed. I still think the back of the bullpen needs to be addressed. You do those two things, and I give this offseason an A+. So for me, it's not complete. For me, there still is more work to be done. But let's see what some of you say. John says, only makes sense to have 20 or 23 million left. Cannot justify spending the percentage of money in places we spent at 45 million of what we do. You use +5, +10 on a lefty outfielder, and +29 on 2 middle relievers. Yeah, I'm hoping there's more money left. I'm just stating the facts that 240 million is the highest team payroll that we've had in the past, around that mark. And you're already there. So we're going into uncharted territory already. Azul says, if Hernandez could control his pitches, Braves probably have the best bullpen with Hernandez, Lee, Suarez, and Iglesias. Look, if Hernandez and Giancarlo Lara figure it out and can throw enough strikes, then yeah, I agree with you. With the moves they've already made, that is one very talented bullpen. But those are just question marks. Mass Boo says, I'd like to see another solid bench addition. I don't know, maybe you would agree with this, Mass, but I think getting a shortstop to move Dubón to the bench would be that bench addition. So for me, it's not so much more as a bench addition as it is getting an actual starting shortstop to move Dubón to the bench. Doug says, even only 1 year of Skubal would cost a significant prospect capital. Yeah, Skubal would definitely put the finishing touches on a really good offseason. Joe Me says, I'd give this offseason a C+. It's better than last year, but more is needed. I think that's a little bit harsh. I think at this point, if this were the offseason, I'd probably give it a B- or just a B. Again, there's still 2 moves for me that really need to be made. And for me to give it an A offseason. I think C+ is probably a little too harsh. Exodus says, still need a shortstop. Dustin Mount says, no need a shortstop for depth, or says, no, need a shortstop for depth. Would be okay with it if we get a shortstop. Corey Bartholomew says, I give the offseason a B so far. I think that's probably where I am right now. And then Video Moon says, bare minimum sign 1 X Factor bat. I don't think that's going to happen. Again, I certainly would love for it to happen, but I think we're beyond the point of them signing a top-tier free agent, which was never likely in the first place. But I think we're beyond that point right now. All right. That will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Starting to lose my voice a little bit after doing a late night recording for the Strip 2 signing and now jumping on with this one. But thank you so much for joining me. James Franny says B is fair. So I agree. That's where I am right now. If the offseason ended today, I think it'd be a B for me. It'd be a fine offseason. I think you go out and get a shortstop, whether it's Ha-Sung Kim or would certainly love a Corey Seager. That would make it an A++. But you do that. You go get just another solid addition to the back of the bullpen, and I give this an A off season. You do that, and you go find at least a depth starter for the rotation, and I think it's an A+ off season. So hopefully that's what's left for the Atlanta Braves. We'll have to see. Again, we're in uncharted territory for the team payroll, so we don't know how much Alex is able to go beyond this. But hopefully there is a little bit more. But again, even if it stopped today, I think this is a fine off season, but hopefully more work to be done. All right. Again, thank you so much for joining today. Thanks so much to all my everydayers out there. If you've hung around to the end here, you're probably one of my everydayers. You can get more access to me and Lindsay by being part of our everydayer club. You can check that out at lockedonbraves.supercast.com. Make sure that you jump on YouTube as well. Hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. Even if you're on the audio version, it'll help us out a lot if you could do those things on YouTube. But thank you so much for joining us here today. All those who have joined in live as well. Appreciate all your support. Make sure that you rate, review,